G'day, folks. Today I'm going to talk about Carlton and Essendon and how I believe they both respectively have the scope to contend if they make one specific decision. And of course, if they don't make that decision, I don't believe either side are contenders or top four teams this year. So to look at Carlton firstly, and against Port Adelaide, well, they had a really good lineup playing, and for this very specific reason. So they had the two key forwards in McKay and Curnow, and then they had just the one ruckman in De Koning, and I believe this to make all the difference in terms of Carlton's level of performance. So if we're to look at when De Koning is playing, well, it's 7-4, and when we look at when you've got the two ruckmen playing for Carlton, well, the record is 2-4. But if we're to look down here, well, it doesn't show the Friday or the Thursday night match against Port Adelaide. So really what the record is for Carlton when they play just the one ruckman is actually 6-0. So that's a substantial difference between a 2-4 record when you've got the two ruckmen playing. And the other thing I wanted to draw your attention to with Carlton as well is last year when you had both McKay and Curnow playing. So obviously you had Curnow play all 26 games, and we have the record here. And then we have when McKay is playing as well. So if we look at the difference, when you've got just Curnow playing of the two, what's Carlton's record? Well, 5-0. Well, that's amazing. So huge difference there. And really it just comes down to that height dynamic, where really Carlton can only really have either the two key forwards and one ruckman, or if necessary, the two ruckmen and one key forward to be really have that 100% win rate over the last two seasons, if we're really just to look at these four players. So my personal view with Carlton, if they want to be a premiership contender this year, is to play just the one ruckman. My personal preference would be De Koning of the two. But it really depends on the dynamic that Carlton would prefer to play with. And ultimately, who would I have as that relieving ruckman when let's say, De Koning needs a breather, which might be for, let's call it 10-15% of the game time or whatever the case may be? Well, then I'd just have McKay playing. And if you look at the height, 204 centimetres, well, he's clearly got that scope to do it. And we also noticed with Carlton, when they had just Curnow playing as a key forward last year and McKay was missing, well, you've obviously got that greater win record, which demonstrates to me that even when Carlton have really just that one genuine key forward out of the two at least in that front half, well, Carlton's front half still functions really well and they're still a winning team. So I don't believe that there'd be any compromise there. And ultimately for Carlton to be playing that smaller team, have that focus on running midfield rotations and really trying to outrun and outball win ultimately against the opponents, well, that's really the dynamic that you really want. So you really want that smaller team overall to really have that, I guess, success as a unit. Because ultimately, if we look at the win-loss rate, well, it's a pretty significant correlation over those last 2 years. Now, on to Essendon. So it's actually a funny story with Essendon, and it's the same thing that I'm noticing here. So if you look at Goldstein when he's playing, well, you've got obviously the 8 wins, 1 draw, 2 losses. Well, let's have a look when Draper is also playing. Well, guess what? 3 wins, 1 draw, 2 losses. So ultimately, when Essendon play just the one ruckman, they're 5-0. So very different team in terms of performance, and really in terms of that being a genuine contender. And Goldstein's had a fantastic season. So despite actually rating Draper quite highly, just in terms of overall team function, well, Essendon seemed to function better with just the one ruckman. And for me personally, well, who would I have playing those relieving minutes behind Goldstein, who has always really liked to monopolise those ruck minutes and play that sort of, whether it's 85% ruck time, maybe even 90% ruck time, depending on how he's going. Well, you've got Peter Wright, and again, guess what? 203 centimetres. He can easily do it. He's got that capability. And then if I'm to go down to Essendon, and of course, this being Sunday, we haven't had the Sunday game yet, so we'll see if Essendon manage to get over the top of Gold Coast. I think that they will, and then that'll mean that it'll be 6-0 with just the one ruckman. But if we have a look at Essendon's front half, so they've actually still got more than enough genuine marking targets up forward. So you've got Goldstein as the number one ruck. I'd have Wright playing those relieving minutes. And even when Wright's in the ruck, well, you've still got Jones as a target, Langford's a substantial target, and so Stringer. So Essendon still have more than enough of those forward targets, and I'd much prefer having those dangerous, I guess, genuine forwards rather than just having the two ruckmen. Because ultimately, again, look at Goldstein. He's always done his best work when he's really monopolised those ruck minutes. So, look, ultimately, it's a shame for Draper, but if Essendon want to win, ultimately, this is the way they'd need to do it. And it would be the same with Pitternet, where, again, not hating on his play, he's obviously very good whenever there's a ruck contest, very strong around stoppages. He's got those sorts of capabilities. Obviously, a lot weaker around the ground and has his limitations there. But really, to maximise the performance of both teams, well, this is how we're going to do it. If it's just the one ruckman, both teams are genuine contenders. And this doesn't apply for all teams, but there are some teams where if they've got that Peter Wright, who's a 203 centimetre, or a Harry McKay, who's a 204 centimetre, well, it's very easy to obviously put them in and play them in the ruck. So there is, from a list building perspective, really that value towards having those super tall key forwards to really allow for that. And you could look at a Bulldogs as a similar sort of scenario where you can have a Sam Darcy or Rory Lobb potentially as those super tall forwards who can play those relieving ruck minutes behind a Tim English. So I think this is the way the game should move more in the future. But of course, there are ruck combinations where they're perfectly fine with both playing, say, 50-50 ruck forward. But yeah, it's just really, I guess, glaringly obvious with both Carlton and Essendon that the win rates are really so substantially different. And I just wanted to draw that to your attention today. So, but yeah, anyway, folks, see you in the next one.